Whether by horse, on foot, or in a car, Americans have loved watching lawmen chase bad guys going back to colonial times. But in this era of social media and live streaming, high-speed car pursuits are as popular as ever and now broadcast everywhere. Devotees use Twitch or Twitter to offer running commentary. They flock to films and video games that glamorize the phenomenon. Take it from a mega fan who drops everything he's doing whenever regularly scheduled programming is interrupted for a televised chase. Take it from me.
We have this one what looks like a male suspect coming out of the vehicle. Now he's dancing.
But that didn't stop the suspect. Even with smoke coming from the flat tire, he kept running from police.
There you go. He's just hit the guardrail, hit another vehicle. More damage there. This looks like it's going to come to an end.
I'm Gustavo Arellano. You're listening to The Times, daily news from the L.A. Times. Today's June 22nd, 2021. The U.S. Supreme Court rules that college athletes can be entitled to further compensation beyond an education. Airlines ask U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland to cite unruly passengers with criminal as well as civil charges due to a plague of them. And 42,000 pounds of pistachios were stolen recently in Central California. Just wait until crop thieves find out about aqualaistas. Those things are edible gold. Today, we'll talk to a criminologist who studies high-speed car chases. We'll also hear from a pioneering TV news helicopter pilot who's one of the first people to ever cover them in Los Angeles, the undisputed capital of car chases. And I'll also be grilled by my senior producer. Everyone disapproves of my car chase obsession, and everyone hopes to break me of my habit. I'm here speaking with my senior producer, Stephen A. Cuevas. What's up, Stephen?
Hey, Gustavo. Well, we know you're here because of your habit. Can you tell us about this little habit, this problem, if you will?
It's part of who I am. I'm born and raised in Southern California. I remember as a teenager watching these high-speed pursuits. And as I've gotten older, I just can't help it. My fans love it when I start live tweeting these chases. It's the adrenaline. I just want to see a good, clean chase with no one hurt, and they're just cool.
You were drawn to TV news car chases as a kid, if I understand right. What was it about them that kind of hooked you?
I remember watching them on film, Smokey and the Bandit. Come on. Eastbound and down. I remember all these different films, and then to see it live. Is it going to be a tank this time? Is it going to be a Bobcat truck? The guilt's starting to build up on me like a good Catholic. The guilt's there, but like, are my better angels going to win, or do my devils have a faster car?
Well, I'm hoping that our guest today might be able to help you with this habit. Would you like to introduce the first guest?
Yeah, oh God, you want to talk about guests? This is a legend. Someone who has seen the rise and fall of the dance between police pursuits and the media is Zoey Tur. She was one of the first people to cover high-speed pursuit in a helicopter here in Southern California. And she was the first to broadcast O.J. Simpson's infamous Ford Bronco pursuit in 1994. By the late 1980s, Zoey says she knew this was a new trend for TV news, and one with some pretty serious consequences both on and off the road.
Well, yeah. For a very long time, people in the news media, people in my business wanted to actually witness or be able to record and cover a high-speed pursuit. The problem is on the ground, you can't really do that. If you're chasing along with the police, you're part of the problem. You're also violating the law. But with a helicopter, that opened the door to this kind of coverage. So when we got the helicopter, we were able to cover and broadcast the very first live police pursuit here in Southern California from, almost the very beginning all the way to the very end. So dramatically, we saw what officers face in real time and the threats that both the suspect and officers pose to the general public.
Were there criticisms back then that covering car chases sensationalized a crime and inspired others to try and speed off from the cops even more?
It was a legitimate news story. So by broadcasting both on television and on KNX News Radio in Los Angeles, we can warn drivers to stay off the road. We can kind of forecast where he was heading to kind of, warn people while giving a bird's eye picture from above of what was happening. But not long afterwards, because I started covering more and more of these things, there were questions. Were we amplifying, this bad behavior? Were people running from the police just to be on television? Now, that statistically, that was never borne out. The reasons that people run from police are more pedestrian. They're more easy to explain.
Growing up in Southern California, there was one, you probably covered it actually. There was someone who was in a pursuit, stopped around the 5 freeway in Orange County. Helicopters were above filming this, and then the man pulls out a gun and shoots himself, and all of this is happening live on the air. What did television executives tell you about their reason for covering them?
My news directors, initially wanted me to cover them, but in covering them, frequently you'd see some violence at the end. And like I had to explain it many times, breaking into children's programming, having to explain that this may be adult content. But in reality, television news went overboard with coverage of police pursuits because many of these involved misdemeanors. They weren't real news stories. They were dramatic video. And I argued against broadcasting these things live, even though it was good for business. I thought it was bad for television news because it diluted the value of television news to replace legitimate news stories for the drunk of the day running from police.
We'll have more after this break. Zoey, before the break, you were talking about how even though you were a pioneer in covering high-speed pursuits, the excess of them, at least the coverage by television stations, took away space from actual legitimate news. How else have you seen the coverage of high-speed pursuits change in the decades since?
What's changed is that police pursuits became something different. They were initially news, and then it became entertainment. So you had television news interrupting news for this entertainment. And people were discounting the very real danger that these chases posed. I had covered well over 300 of these things. So I saw the dangers. I saw people getting hit. So I saw these things for what they were. And that was a dangerous spectacle that shouldn't necessarily be televised unless there were real risks to the public or it involved, a real serious crime. So I felt police were a big part of the problem, the culture of chasing suspects.
In that triangle then between the public who loves these car chases, the television stations who air them, and then law enforcement who pursue, as you said, a lot of times just a misdemeanor, who do you think is the guiltiest party in making them into a spectacle?
The blame always begins with the suspect, the person that led police on the chase. And then we have the organizations like the L.A. County Sheriff's Department, the Los Angeles Police Department. It was, up until, maybe 15 years ago, it was the Wild West. The suspect ran, the police chased, and it didn't matter who got in the way, whether it was your mother, a family member, someone innocent. It didn't matter. Getting the suspect was all that mattered. And anything else was just collateral damage.
Do you regret then your role in popularizing coverage of high-speed pursuits?
Yes, I do. I feel I've done a great disservice to broadcast television. I mean, I had the right intentions and the right equipment. And all of this was meant to cover legitimate news stories, natural disasters, flooding, fires, brush fires that threaten homes and businesses. The news helicopter is a remarkable tool that has been overused. It's unfortunate. Use of the helicopter is morphed into what it's morphed into.
And then finally, what would you tell people like myself who, despite, or maybe not even knowing about the dangers that happen in high-speed pursuits, drop everything just to watch them and comment on them?
Try to remember, before you run outside and you're waving at this suspect going by, like people did with the O.J. Simpson pursuit. Just remember the underlying things that are going on. This is somebody that, in many cases, most cases, is just some person that's made a dumb decision and is panicked, maybe a horrible criminal, or on the other hand, they may be just having a bad day, an emotional breakdown, or just fear. And then you have to consider the lives that are at stake, that people are at real risk. These aren't fun. These aren't like, entertainment. This is real serious stuff. You're seeing people flailing about in trouble. And just keep that in mind.
Thank you so much for this interview, Zoey.
Anytime, of course.
Zoey Tur is a documentary filmmaker and a former TV news helicopter reporter for KCBS, KNX, and other Southern California TV and radio news stations. University of South Carolina professor Geoffrey Alpert has studied high-risk police activities for over 30 years. Part of his focus, naturally, is police pursuits, a subject on which he co-wrote a book in 2014. Professor Alpert, welcome to The Times.
Thank you.
I've read previous interviews with you where you said that the American love of law enforcement pursuits go back to the days of the Wild West on horses. Films depicting car chases go back to the earliest silent reels when automobiles were still a novelty. What is it about the American mind that makes us such fans of them?
Well, I'm not sure we're fans of them as much as it's been part of American culture that if you do something and the police want to capture you, you have that internal desire to flee. You don't want to get caught. And I think we've seen over the years, again, back to the Wild West days, horse chases. Everyone jumps on their horse and chases the bank robber out of town or chases whoever. That's just part of our culture, and it's grown. But the reality of it isn't nearly as sexy or interesting because people died.
Yeah, nevertheless, though, you had people cheering on these people who are fleeing in their own ways. Bonnie and Clyde, Pretty Boy Floyd, in the modern era, the Fast and Furious franchise. And then, of course, the real phenomenon of these car chases, now not just broadcast on television, but also being streamed online.
Well, I think for a while out in your part of the world, there was actually a situation where you could subscribe to a feed that had these things live. And it's usually a fascination from people who've never been close to it, who don't know people who've been injured, don't know people who've been involved. And from afar, yeah, it can be exciting. But the closer you get to it, the further away you want to be.
How has both the police strategy behind pursuits and the public's embrace of them changed over time, especially in this era of the internet that we live in?
Well, in was it the 60s, I believe, late 60s, a group called Physicians for Automotive Safety came out against pursuits. They basically said, as emergency room physicians, we see the consequences. You police have to stop. In the early 80s, the California Highway Patrol basically said, we're going to chase you till the wheels fall off. And their approach was, if we don't chase, there's going to be havoc on the roads. In the 70s and 80s, we started to see concern about officer safety and then public safety. And where we are today is we're seeing the progressive departments all over the country, and I will say all over the world, reducing their car chases and limiting their car chases to violent crimes. So we've seen this incredible change to we're not going to chase you because of public safety unless it's a very serious crime.
So on the law enforcement side, they've seen the numbers, they've seen the devastation caused by these police pursuits and say, yeah, it's not worth it, not just for our officers, but also for the public.
Well, the progressive departments, we still have departments, there are 18,000 some departments in this country, some of which still chase till the wheels fall off. The majority of the larger cities and the progressive departments, yes, have taken that approach. It's not worth it. We don't want our officers involved, even the trauma. And I've talked to many officers who've been in chases where they come to the conclusion and they're dead people, dead babies, and they can't get over it. Some have left the job because that will never get out of their head. So it becomes a very complex situation.
Yeah, in other words, law enforcement who still wants to get on them, it's not all Smokey and the Bandit. There's no reason to romanticize them.
Exactly. And yeah, look, the public gets smarter too. There is a group of people who are going to flee from the police. But the myths that come out of it are really that if we don't chase, everyone's going to run. And we know that's not true. And the other myth is there's a dead body in the trunk and that's why they're fleeing. And we know that's not true. So most people are fleeing for some really stupid reasons. And we're starting to see the evidence of that come out. And we're also starting to see evidence of how many people flee when they really don't have to. But what are the police supposed to do? They're caught in this horrible situation. And in fact, for the gamblers out there, it's very much like you're playing blackjack and, the dealer's showing a 10 and you've got a 16. There's no good choice.
What about the argument that the more you show these car chases or police pursuits, the more people are going to engage in them? You also have phenomenons like the Grand Theft Auto franchise, one of the most successful video game franchises in history. You have, of course, the Fast and Furious franchise. In the past 20 years, you've seen a lot of this romanticizing of these police pursuits of trying to get away from law enforcement in a very fast car.
It's a great moneymaker. You just pointed out the dollar payback. It captures the public. It's adrenaline driven. And if you can imagine the adrenaline of just watching these things, can you imagine being in one and how you get caught up in it? And that's one of the big problems. You're not going to make good decisions when you're so jacked up on adrenaline, trying to catch someone, get around cars. It just becomes a nightmare.
So you do think that the more media shows these, the more people at least have it in their mind, hey, I could get into one of these and I could try to escape?
I have no idea. There's no evidence on I can escape. There's no evidence on that question. But there is evidence that as long as the police continue to chase, most of the suspects are going to continue to flee. And there's also very good evidence on once the cops quit chasing, the suspects are going to slow down and feel safe unless they have a death wish.
Do you think then the less the media then shows these, then the less chases there's going to be?
I don't know which way the arrow points in that one. I really don't. There's not been any research on the impact of people watching these things. It's kind of like the argument that, the violent video games cause crime. It sounds interesting, but there's no good, strong evidence to argue either way.
You're out in South Carolina. I'm here in the West Coast. Are car chases also a huge thing back east and in the South the way they are out here?
Well, I think you mentioned Smokey and the Bandit.
I did, yeah.
We're in NASCAR country. This is, we see them all the time. And I think we see a lot of things going on here that you wouldn't see on the West Coast. I'm from Oregon, so I'm not really a Southerner. And I think in Eugene and Portland and some of the larger cities, we see the same thing in California, where the smart departments just aren't chasing for anything other than a violent crime.
Is it ethical then for the public to be cheering on these police pursuits?
Well, the public has its right to do anything it wants. And yeah, people cheer on. I mean, like I mentioned NASCAR. I don't know if you've ever been to a NASCAR event, but you have hundreds of thousands of people waiting for someone to crash. So it's kind of an American tradition. It's exciting until you know someone who's been involved or a family member gets involved. And when I train police officers, I often ask them, well, how would you feel if your 16-year-old daughter were hit by a fleeing suspect being chased by one of your friends for a minor offense? And that gets to them. It's an effective but tragic explanation, and one that kind of gets under their skin. And that's why I do it.
Part of this episode is also my own fandom, if you will. Yeah, I grew up with them. I played the Grand Theft video games. I saw the Fast and Furious. To this day, if there's one on local television, I just start tweeting it and people start following my tweets because of it. But yeah, I'll be honest. I have never known anyone who got injured in one of these. I've gotten some tweets that said I had a family member who got hurt in one of them. That makes me think for a second as I continue to tweet.
Well, one research project that we did that was quite interesting was a public opinion survey where we asked the public what they thought and do they support police chasing. We asked half the people their opinions, and then the other half, before we asked them the same questions, we provided them with local statistics. How many people die from these things? How many people are injured? What it costs you as a taxpayer? And the groups were significantly different. The more people know about the dangers, the costs, the tragedy of these pursuits, the less they support them for minor offenses. Now, at the level of a violent crime, rape, robbery, murder, they still get a lot of support even when you know the numbers. But for the minor offenses, it's so different. The more people know, the less they support them.
Thank you so much for this interview and also for the education, Professor.
Happy to do it. Good luck.
Okay, I'm kind of chastised with my love of car chases, and here I'm back with my senior producer, Stephen A. Cuevas, the original chastiser for this whole episode. What's up, Stephen?
So, Gustavo, have Zoey Tur and veteran criminologist Geoffrey Alpert managed to change your mind at all about televised car chases?
Yes, they're wrong. They're wrong. I shouldn't see them, but you suspend disbelief. You really think that when these cars, because at least the ones that come out on television, I would have to say 85% of the ones I've seen in my life end with no incident at all. But yeah, I mean, I said at the top, 41 people died during high-speed pursuits last year, the highest in almost 15 years. People die. I can't see them. I can't see them. I have to repeat it as a mantra for myself. I cannot see car chases anymore. That's bad.
By the way, have you ever led police on any sort of pursuit?
No. You know what? I never would, but I gotta say every once in a while, you get lulled into the sense that you're invincible and that you can outrun anyone. I also tweet this. I tweet that as long as you don't hurt anyone, then you're cool doing a car chase. But obviously now, after talking to Zoey and the Professor Alpert, I cannot cheer anymore. I cannot cheer. It's no, I can't.
Well, you know what else we can't outrun, Gustavo?
What?
Advertisements.
God, this is hilarious. Well, okay, we're getting too meta for this. We'll be back after this break. And that's it for this episode of The Times, daily news from the LA Times. Tomorrow, pandemic PTSD. How can we improve life for those who suffer from it? Our show is produced by Shannon Lynn, Stephen A. Cuevas, and Denise Guerra. Our executive producer is Abby Fentress-Swanson. Our engineer is Mario Diaz. Our editor is Shawnee Hilton. Our intern is Ashley Brown, and our theme music is by Andrew Eapen. I'm Gustavo Arellano. We'll be back tomorrow with all the news and desmadre.
And you, young man, stop watching these chases.
Gracias.